from a defabricated garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA. This is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, tips on keeping your infirmed and elderly mother away from the table saw. And now, the podcast host who can't wait to show you his new power tool, Pete Dominic!
Yes, indeed. Come on over. I've got a power tool for you, Pete Co. That is the great Pete Co. At Pete Co VO, doing great introductions each and every day here on Stand Up. Thank you very much for joining me today. It is the Thursday show, which means tonight I'll be hosting a hangout for Stand Up subscribers, and we'll have a special guest. Our friend Mara Quint is going to stop by, and I'm sure make us laugh and play some games and answer some questions. It should be a great hangout tonight at 8 Eastern. If you are a subscriber, you'll get an email with a link. If you're not, sign up now, standupwithpete.com. And joining me on today's show is the great Tim Wise, anti-racist writer, speaker, educator, one of my all-time favorite guests. I caught up with him for about an hour yesterday, and thanks to Karen Madison, who he texted me the thread that he had been tweeted about in terms of Herschel Walker and Kanye West and others. He's been writing some great essays, and I saw that. I said, I got to get him on. He was available. We made it happen. So very happy to have Tim Wise joining me today. And no intro, no news segment on today's show because I ran out of time. Very busy Wednesday and doing a couple things for a couple people and the family. Long story, nothing really to get into. All good. As a matter of fact, I just want to take a moment to mention that I'm doing really well. I think you'll be happy to hear. I've always been honest with you as much as I can be about kind of what's happened in my life and how I'm doing and trying to relate to you and how you are doing. And I just wanted to put it out there that here in the beginning of December, beginning of winter, I'm in a real good place. I'm doing a lot of really great positive things in my life, meditation and reading and writing every day. I've gotten into this routine. I've created this practice. I've got a lot of good people around me. Things are going really well with Val and I, my girls. And even though I'm always worried about this podcast and trying to keep it going and keep getting subscriptions and keep your subscriptions, that's, if that's my main concern, then I'm doing okay. I love this work. I appreciate your support. But more than anything else, I've got my health. I've got a great group of people around me, more friends than anybody I know, including many of you. And I'm just feeling great. And I wanted to put that positive energy out there here at the beginning of December, episode 737, and in a good place, at least for today, and have been for a while. So outside of this dumb headache that's preventing me really from getting much more done on the show tonight, hey, I'm golden. And much of that is because of your support. So thank you so much for being there for me. So many amazing people that I've met, and so many of you have connected with each other. I hope to see you at tonight's hangout at 8. And let's get to my conversation with Tim Wise. Tim's website is speakoutnow.org if you want to learn more about Tim, but he's one of the most prominent anti-racist writers and educators in the U.S. He's the author of 9 books, including his latest, Dispatches from the Race War. You can find him on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you should read him at Medium. His address for that is timjwise.medium.com. So good. So many great essays there, and I've just learned so much from him. We've become really good friends, and we had another great conversation today. So, shall we, ladies and gentlemen, Tim Wise. All right, there he is, Tim Jacob Wise on Twitter, and I've got him the day after the second time, was it the fourth time Raphael Warnock has had to run in Georgia? Yeah. Is it 4 times? Thank you for joining me. And before we get to that, how are you feeling about Twitter? I'm glad you're still there. I loved your latest. How are you doing? How are you thinking about it?
I mean, it's a train wreck, obviously. But, it was sort of that all along. I mean, now it's a train wreck whose conductor is, maybe significantly more narcissistic than the last guy. But at the end of the day, most of the bullshit that was going on before is still going on. And, there's been this uptick in hateful activity because folks, I guess, thought that Elon had greenlit them to do that, when in fact they could have done it before. I mean, they were doing it before he even came along. So it's sort of funny. They just discovered that they could post racist, misogynistic stuff. They could have been doing it all along, and many of them were. So, I mean, it's a mess. But, as I said in the piece that went semi-viral that I wrote a few weeks ago now, I think there's something really privileged and problematic about folks just darting, particularly white folks. I mean, if you're black or brown and you want to get the hell off that platform and not deal with it, I get it. But what I was seeing was a lot of white progressive and liberal folks who were saying, oh my God, it's going to be so toxic. I can't deal with toxicity. I have to get out of here for my mental health. All right, great. Meanwhile, Black Twitter gets to deal with these assholes alone, And so at some point, if you really say you're about the work, you have to stay and take some of that burden off of Black and brown folks, because most of them are sticking around. Now, some have left, like Ava DuVernay has left. There's some big names who have left, and I respect that. I'm not telling that's the way I feel about Black folks want to leave the country. I don't lecture. Right? Like, I don't tell them, like, hey, no, you can't leave. You must stay. No, y'all got to do what you got to do. But to me, part of being white and fighting racism in this moment is you got to deal with your people. And if your people are acting nuts on Twitter, then that's where we need to be. And, you might need to take a couple-day mental health break every now and then, but just don't check your mentions. Like, I never check my mentions. I don't know that people are saying horrible things about me because I just don't even go over to. You don't have to do that. Like, people act like they have to check their mentions. No, you don't. And your life will be better if you don't. Just hit and run. Just post and go. And the Nazis will scream at you and you won't even know they did it. And that's the best. That's the best of all possible worlds.
Oh, you're better than man than me. If I get a mention at 4:23 in the morning, I have an alarm to set me up, to wake me up and see who mentioned me. Yeah. Now, it's a good. You're right about that. A lot of people are also learning like the functionality that actually Twitter offers, like going private and be like, oh my God, I didn't even realize I could do this or that and not have to worry about all these horrible people. So it's and that's a great piece, by the way, at Medium. You're talking about the fleeing Twitter, the Twexodus. Am I saying it right? Is about white liberal fragility, which you just talked about. And that's true of a lot of different spaces. It's true of leaving your community. You mentioned leaving your country, I mean, isn't that what white flight was?
Yeah. I mean, I get the impulse. I don't like the toxicity on there. For God's sake, it's horrible. And I don't like the fact that Elon Musk thinks that, the failure to publish Hunter Biden's dick pics is the greatest censorship in the last decade. That's the big threat to First Amendment freedom, is that they didn't let that go through. That's a weird thing to me. But the thing is, there's so much that can be done in that space, and that Black folks are still doing in that space, and that women are trying to do against all kinds of misogynistic bullshit in that space, and LGBTQ folks are trying to do. And until some of these other platforms, I mean, everybody's talking Mastodon, whatever. When they get that figured out, like, by all means, set up an account there. Have as many things going as you can. But to think that you're going to go over to somebody said, go to Tribal, Tribel, which is, first of all, it's a terrible name for anyone who's doing anti-racism stuff. I'm over on Tribal, where just sounds ethnocentric, right? It just sounds like something that a Nazi would create. So, but it's fine. It's nice. I went over to it. It's like, it's not very functional, but there's like 13 people on it. So I mean, even on a bad day with a shadow ban, I can reach more people on Twitter. Even if Elon decides, oh, this guy was, and it's happened a couple times. I say something snarky about Elon, and all of a sudden I notice that my likes drop dramatically and my retweets drop dramatically. Right. Whereas if I wrote something really good about him, I'm sure it would blow up and he would love it. But even with the shadow ban in place, I'm going to get more reaction than I get on Tribal or even Mastodon at this point. So I just don't see the point in whining and running when there isn't really a space that provides what Twitter provides yet. Now, if it gets worse and I see Black folks heading for the door, because they're like, hey, this isn't even helpful for it. This doesn't serve our purposes anymore. That's a different conversation, But until then, I think you just got to stay and do what you can.
That's a great piece. Everybody should read that. Hate jizz was probably one of my favorite 2 words connected. It really did the trick.
That was very creative.
Did the trick for me. I get it. I want to ask you about this thing, because I think you kind of write about it in this piece, The Right Hasn't Changed. It was always like this. And you use a lot of data and history and references in this piece. But I want to use this story about Ted Cruz's daughter to get into this, because Ted Cruz's daughter reportedly committed some kind of self-harm. We don't know. Point is, nobody that I've seen, any respected progressive person or any front, center, left, and right, whatever you want to call it, has really taken a shot at Ted Cruz for that. Meanwhile, Ted Cruz certainly has taken all kinds of shots when people are suffering. Most recently that I can remember, Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked, and he was unkind on social media and on his podcast and other places, and nobody's saying anything about him and about this situation. People are staying away from it for obvious reasons. It's a teenage girl. But he's a horrible person, and yet nobody at least respectful. And the point of that is, who are we? Who are we? And this idea that you're filled with hatred and bigotry and disdain, and that you get off on cruelty, is part of America. It's who Donald Trump is. It's what he pulled back. It's what he revealed. It's so many commentators on the right, Tucker Carlson, and so many more. I'm never not shocked by their cruelty, their anger, their meanness everywhere. And you write about how they've never changed. It was always like this. To some extent, you're talking more about power dynamics, but there's also that bit in there about cruelty and dominance. And I almost feel like there's a tie in the talk about how good people don't go after people whose daughter, no matter if you hate them, whose daughters are in a bad way in this case.
Right. Well, there's two things, and they're related, even though I'm talking about a different thing, and I'll get to that. But the thing with Cruz's daughter, I mean, when I saw that story, my initial gut reaction, I didn't even for 1 millisecond have a pang of joy, or Schadenfreude, or any of that. Like, there was never a moment where I thought, good, that asshole, that awful, maybe now no, like, as somebody, I've had friends who have committed suicide. My father attempted suicide when I was 16 years old. I've written about that and talked about that. My only reaction was, oh my God, I really hope she's okay. I hope she gets the help that she needs. And I wish the family well. That's what a normal, decent human being does. Now, I'm not going to say there aren't conservatives who would have the same reaction I had. There are plenty of fine and decent conservative people. But the difference between those folks and the MAGA folks and the far right, of which Cruz is a part, like, he's more of that Christian nationalist end of it maybe than the other, right? But that's they get off on that. There is this dominance instinct, a sadistic impulse. And it's the impulse, which there have been academic journal articles on this in the last several years, that, online trolling is deeply related to sadism, to this personality dark triad stuff, right? Which is sadism and narcissism. And there's something else. I can't remember the third part of the triad, but whatever it is, like, there are these personality traits. And I've known people on the left who have some of those, but by and large, we on the left got our own problems. We're neurotic as hell. We have our own stuff, right? We got our own issues. But sadism and cruelty, and like even the kind of cruelty that when people have launched death threats at me and my family on social media, or I get a text or a phone call, or somebody, is posting threatening things, like, I would never, there are a lot of people that I really despise politically. I would never think to myself, let me just dial them up and threaten to harm them. Like, let me just, when I was doing anti-David Duke work in the early 90s, and there was pretty clear evidence that Duke's own daughters, really, who he wasn't with, they were living with the mother, who was remarried to Don Black, who started Stormfront. So it's like a very sort of weird thing, like Nazis, and then she got married to another Nazi, and it's very hard to explain. But I never thought to myself, like, I'm glad those girls are miserable with their Nazi stepdad and that. Like, no, my God, this is a terrible thing.
Yeah.
It's a terrible thing. And so that's part of it. Like, the right just doesn't do empathy very well. And in fact, they mock the very notion of empathy.
Right.
As being weak and being soft and being, whatever. The piece that I wrote was really saying, look, we act like somehow Donald Trump broke the party or broke conservatism. What really has been going on, again, and I've talked about this before, if you really understand what the right and left are, then there's nothing that's really that odd about where things stand right now. If you really believe that the right has been about small government and personal liberty and staying out of your business, and the government that governs least is the government that governs best, if you believe that shtick, then yeah, you'd be confused. But if you actually understand that the history of right and left is not about do you believe in the state or the power of the state, it's about whose ox is getting gored by the state. If the state is doing the bidding of the dominant groups in society, the rich, white, Christian, male, straight, et cetera, then the right loves the state. If the state is doing right by less powerful groups, that is to say, poor and working class people, women, LGBTQ folks, people of color, non-Christians, to create pluralism, that's when they have a problem with big government. So everything they're doing, restricting women's reproductive autonomy, that's big government, but it's in the service of the dominant group, men. Right, the national security state putting money. Well, that's big government, but that's on behalf of the nation in a global order as being the dominant nation. Right. Tax cuts for the wealthy benefit the rich. Christian nationalism benefits Christians. Rolling back affirmative action. All these things. If you really look at them, they all make sense if you understand what right and left has been historically. It's what Professor Corey Robin talks about in his book, The Reactionary Mind. That reactionary thinking has always been about being on the side of maintaining or reinforcing traditional hierarchy.
You write in this piece. Let me just, if I could just read your words, because it's so succinct here and well written. You write, the dirty little secret of American conservatism is this. It was always and only about the desire to maintain traditional lines of authority. It isn't about small government. It isn't about freedom and liberty. It's about defending the prerogatives of traditionally powerful groups against the challenges of less powerful ones. The rich over the poor, men over women, Christians over everyone, whites over people of color, now increasingly straight and cisgender folks over the LGBT community, which you have another post about this shooting in Colorado, which is really filled with, it's just so great that I love so much. And then you reference Corey Robin, as you just did, about the book, The Reactionary Mind. And you write, to those on the far right, authority and hierarchy, traditionally understood, are valid by definition. Those in power are in power because they deserve to be there. They are better people, the more deserving. We really convince ourselves of that without even reading anything, just experiencing things. Right. I think as a white person, you could almost be excused for being on a journey in this country and somehow thinking that you are better because things seem to turn up pretty good. I'm not saying that they turn up good for white people that we don't suffer. I'm saying. Yeah.
If you live in a society that the whole underlying structural philosophy is that wherever you end up is all about your own effort because everybody's a rugged individual and we have meritocracy. If that's the ideological glue that binds together your society, then of course you're going to look around and you're going to say, well, these are the folks that have always been running shit. They must be smarter. That's why they're running things, right? It's a perfectly understandable default once you accept without comment that ideology. And all you need for the evidence that is the ideology, go back and read what William F. Buckley, when the National Review was arguing in the late 50s and the early 60s against the civil rights movement and attacking the civil rights movement, one of the arguments that Buckley made at the time in the pages of National Review, he said it, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect of, we really want black people to be civilized enough to be able to vote and to pick the leadership, but they're just not there yet. And the South realizes that. Like, I am paraphrasing, but it's not off by much. And you can actually go and watch the debate that Buckley had with James Baldwin at Oxford, which is on YouTube. And he says some version of that there. It's like you can see in Buckley's demeanor and even in his words, like, I really want you people to be part of this process, but you just need some more time to learn. Like, it's almost, which is horribly offensive, don't get me wrong, but the difference is it's not the kind of hateful thing the Klan was saying. It's like a pitying kind of racism, right? Like I have this, and enslavers used to say this. They would say, well, emancipation won't work because these people don't really understand freedom yet, and that's why they can't be free. And don't get me wrong, that's horribly offensive, horribly racist, but it's not rooted in hatred so much as it is pity, because you just assume, well, you're not fit to govern, because if you were, you'd already be governing, right? If you were really fit, you'd already be running stuff. You would have conquered us. You would have enslaved us. You would have come and captured us, but we captured you, therefore, or we took your land in indigenous people. So therefore, we're the winners. So therefore, we're the winners, right? And so there's a logic, an evil kind of logic to it. And this is why and what people don't understand when they get confused about like the Democrats and Republicans, and all the folks who are Republicans, love to tell us that, the Democrats were the party of slavery and the Confederacy, which is funny because they're the ones that still wave the flag. Democrats have all given that up.
Yeah.
So Republicans do, it's sort of like, the Dodgers used to be in Brooklyn. Shit changes, so keep up, we all know like things change. But the thing, if you understand right and left, right, as traditional hierarchy, then you would realize, well, the Confederates, the Southerners, the Democrats were the party of the right in those days, because they supported lines of traditional authority, traditional white, patriarchal, Christian domination. And then now the party that does that happened to be the Republicans, but the right and the left are still the right and the left. It's just, what
conservatism versus liberal, whatever word you want to use that people identify as. Tell me about how that's changed along the lines of sexual orientation and identity, because you write about the prerogatives of Christian hegemony here as well, and that Christian nationalism has become more militant than would seem necessary even a generation ago. You say, with marriage equality and trans visibility challenging the overwhelming normalcy of heterosexual and cisgender identity, those committed to, quote, traditional views of gender and sexuality, typically informed by their faith beliefs, are rising to defend them. We saw this yesterday at the Supreme Court, and we're seeing, and then we can connect to your latest piece. This young man is one who slaughtered people at an LGBT bar venue on a drag queen night, and then his lawyer said he identifies with non-binary, and now, as just updated, I saw in your Twitter timeline, now that they've charged him with 380 counts of whatever, he's going by he again. I wonder what happened.
Yeah, well, clearly the non-binary thing was just bullshit. I mean, it was, but even if it had been true, the point is it doesn't matter, because self-hate is a thing. So there's a non-binary version of Steven from Django. Okay, that's possible. Why is that shocking to anybody? That's very possible.
Right.
No, look, the thing is, and this is what I think, I was thinking about this recently. I think the biggest mistake that liberal and progressive people have made in the last couple of decades is that we have gotten so comfortable with the idea that progress toward pluralism and justice was inevitable. Things were, because think about how far we've come on LGBTQ stuff in just the last 20 years. We have, as a society, come pretty far. Like, there's been some real progress, even within the Democratic Party, right? I mean, Barack Obama would not support same-sex marriage, when he started running. So there's been some real movement, but the mistake we made was assuming that, it's like a linear progress. It always gets better. And, the young kids will figure it out. The old people will die. The country's becoming more multicultural, less white. That'll solve the problem. I think the Democrats really, went to sleep on that and figured it's going to be fine. We have a Browning of America. It'll be good. We didn't think about Enrique Tarrio, the Proud Boy. We didn't think about brown folk who were more than willing to engage with fascism under certain circumstances. But the biggest mistake was not realizing that the phenomena Carol Anderson at Emory wrote about in her book, White Rage, also has a religious equivalent, a gender equivalent, right? And her book said every step forward for Black folks in particular has led to white rage backlash of some sort. She goes through the whole litany since abolition all the way to the present and documents it very, very clearly. Well, the same thing happens with religion. When all of a sudden Christian hegemony is challenged in a way that it's not hegemonic. It's still dominant, but it's not hegemonic anymore, to where Christians are actually having people challenge their core beliefs, like actually having, as obnoxious as I think Sam Harris and Dawkins and all the new atheists, quote unquote, are personally, they're obnoxious individuals personally. But the fact that they were able to gain some traction starting a decade or so ago, yeah. I'm sure if I was like a Christian nationalist, that would have been like the end of the world. Or the fact that you look out and you see that young people aren't going to church anymore, and the biggest growing group religiously are the non-affiliateds, right? And so if you're used to hegemony, pluralism feels like oppression. It feels like the wheels are coming off the bus. And so they're going to do the same thing that white folks racially have done, that Carol Anderson talks about, or men, when the prerogatives of masculinity are challenged, whether it's the ability to sexually harass without being pushed back, tell, sexist jokes in the workplace, grab somebody's ass in the workplace, engage in overtly misogynistic humor on the job or whatever, or in a stand-up routine for that matter, like telling rape jokes, and all of a sudden somebody pushes back and you're like, oh, and then there's a version of male rage that comes with that.
Oh,
and so I think we've just we've just made this assumption, and it's because of the way we teach history, which is part of the problem. We teach history, most of our schools, as the linear process of shit's always getting better, right? So we start back here and look at all the challenges, but look, it's this it's constant upward slope, when in fact, history is 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 4 steps forward, a step and a half back. If we would teach Reconstruction accurately, maybe we would understand that, but we don't even teach the Reconstruction era and the way that it was obliterated. So young people start thinking, oh, well, it's sort of, maybe we got some challenges right now, but I'm sure it'll work out. And then that encourages people not to take the reins themselves and bend it to their will. And meanwhile, the other side is more than willing to take the reins and bend it to theirs.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I mean, this piece that you wrote, let's see, what's the actual title of it? After Colorado Springs, speak no more progress. Speak no more of progress. Justice and acceptance are never finally won. Freedom is a constant struggle. Pick a side. I want to describe to you where I was when I read this. So I was hanging out with my daughter, so I was in her room. And I start reading this, and then I sit up. So I sit physically up, and then I just had to leave the room. And then I just read it standing. And by the end of it, I felt like I was pumping my fist. I'm like, yes, this. It captured all of the emotion needed. And I immediately tweeted out to share with everybody. Everybody must read this piece. It's hard in a way, kind of, to read because it's somewhat like pick a side, and I don't want to pick a side. I don't want that. I want to find common ground with people. And I'm not saying that this piece says not to, and I'm not saying that it's that divisive. I'm saying that it worked for me, Tim. It worked for me. It captured my emotion, my passion. And I want you to just say a little bit more about what you were trying to say with this piece. And maybe, I don't know, what the reaction has been to it.
The thing I really wanted to say with the piece was I think we've lulled ourselves to sleep with some of that progress. And I'm not saying the progress hasn't been real. I'm saying it's not the point, right? I'm saying the fact that we have marriage equality is great. It's not the point. The fact that we have a generation like my children's generation, with large numbers of their generation identifying as non-binary, identifying as queer, identifying certainly as allies. If not, that's great. But that is a false sense of security, because this young man who walked into this club in Colorado Springs is from that same generation. He's from that supposedly tolerant generation. He's not Fred Phelps. He didn't grow up in Fred Phelps's church. He's not one of these old codger, homophobes and people that sit at the end of the bar talking about the queers, not in the current way that we use that term, but in the old fashioned slur kind of way that we use that term. And so when people get all excited about progress, or it's like, oh, my Aunt Mildred loves Queer Eye. I don't give a damn about your Aunt Mildred. Or, oh, I love watching RuPaul's Drag Race. All right, well, right now, drag shows are getting shut down all over the country by Proud Boys and neo-Nazi organizations. So what the hell good does it do that you watch the Bravo network? I don't care that Andy Cohen is going to ring in the new year with Anderson Cooper, and we're all going to watch him get drunk and think how cool. I don't care.
Well, to be fair, they canceled that. Thank God.
Well, I know.
It was horrible.
But you know what I mean?
It was horrible.
Like this idea that we've got these gay icons that everybody loves, but not everybody. Like, not everybody. There's this false sense of security that folks think, oh, well, they've arrived because of this, they've arrived because of that. But meanwhile, folks are getting slaughtered. So I just need folks to realize that we've acted like there's a finish line that we crossed. And I know that the activists in the LGBTQ community know better. I'm not saying anything they don't say every day, but the celebrities don't. Like, there's a celebrity culture around some of these shows that's just like, look how far we've come and look how great this is. And isn't this fabulous? But your fabulosity does not protect LGBTQ kids from being turned out of their homes by their parents. It doesn't keep people from being shot in a club. Right. It doesn't keep people from being beaten on the street, trans folk disproportionately. It's not doing anything for them. And so I need for people to stop with the celebratory cultural victories for a minute and realize that there is a group of people that are mobilizing who have every intention of terrorizing folks back into the closet. And so now where do you stand? Oh, so you watch Drag Race at home. Are you going to go protect a drag show that's at your library? Or are you going to go to or a drag brunch that's happening in your community? Are you going to stand out there and defend that place against the Proud Boys? Because if not, I don't give a damn that you like RuPaul. I don't care.
Well, take on this comment from one of your readers at this piece who writes, who doesn't, I think, took issue with this piece because this person writes, rage begetting rage. Gandhi wouldn't support. I doubt Martin Luther King would support this. Humanity will always cause people to lash out. We don't know why the shooter lashed out. Was it self-hate? Very likely. It's sad. It's sad that so many people die of hate. Hate is a very powerful human emotion, especially self-hate. I believe the only answer is empathy. This is an emotion that is totally gone in the divided states. Is that justified? And so I guess this person is disagreeing with you that they think.
Well, what did I call for? What did I call for that's hateful? I'm just saying pick a side. Like there are in fact two sides to the debate over full LGBTQ equality in humanity. Either you are going to defend that and fight for that, or you're not. And fighting for it isn't hating those who don't support it. It's saying we're not going to allow you to prevent the full recognition of humanity for a significant chunk of the world's population.
I completely disagree with the commenter. I think they might misinterpret. What I read in this piece was a call to activism. When you say pick a side, I think about what I can actually do. It doesn't mean I don't have empathy for people who are broken people who end up murdering people. I actually do. I do have empathy for them, which is why I generally don't believe in the carceral state. I get it. I understand what leads people to do things. That does two things can be true. I can also pick a side, and I have picked a side, and a lot of it is because of your work throughout the years. That's what I read when I read this.
Well, a comment like that, the way I hear a comment like that is, number one, I think it's a misinterpretation, obviously. And I get it because people misinterpret my words all the time. And we all do that. We see what we want to see. We hear what we want to hear. And so my biggest problem with a comment like that, I believe in empathy, but I don't believe in extending more empathy to a terrorist than his victims. Right. And so when I hear a comment like that, we need to understand where he's coming. Well, we will get to that. But right now, I'm not even like the justice system will deal with him, I hope, in a way that will protect the rest of us from the likes of him. The question is, how do you prevent that from happening again? And you can't say, let's empathize. Let's empathize with the broken people is one thing. Let's keep broken people from harming other folks is a very different thing. And in order for that to be diminished in likelihood, we have to, as a culture, isolate people who think the way that this young man does, or his family that raised him this way. His dad, I guess, who he's estranged from, who's like some musclehead, creatine-soaked MMA wannabe fighter who does porn. He looked
fucking exactly like actor Josh Brolin. Exactly. It was poor Josh Brolin is what. Josh Brolin is the true victim in all of this.
Right. I mean, and here's a guy who basically, when they told him what happened, something about his son at a gay bar. He's like, oh my God, is he gay? No, dude, he killed gay people. How about that one? And he didn't seem nearly as upset by that. Like,
well, neither did. Someone reached out to me, a publicist, about some LGBT leader with some organization. And in the pitch, the publicist writes that apparently the Denver Broncos, the Colorado football team, did something in solidarity with LGBT people. And they've had a lot of, obviously, violence in that state. But this, targeting LGBT people. And in the publicist pitch, they said, apparently the comments on, I guess, the Denver Broncos post in solidarity with the LGBT people. So Denver fans, most likely, maybe not, I don't know, it doesn't matter. They were so horrible. There was a lot of this time around, gay people being targeted. There was a lot of that on the right. Tucker Carlson basically almost saying, hey, I get it. I get it. If you're going to sexualize our kids, if you're going to groom our kids, we're going to kill you, is basically the message that I heard him saying. There is no quarter for gay people because they're grooming our children. That's what they've made the leap to. It's so dangerous. It's why people are targeting drag queens and trans people. They think that they are grooming their own children or themselves, maybe even, to change their sexual orientation, etc. And they find that
and they were attacking. And in the case of the club in Colorado Springs, they then attacked the guy who was the heterosexual father and husband who was there, who was the guy that jumped the shooter. One of the two people and they said, well, he can't possibly, no self-respecting heterosexual would have brought his family to a drag show. What are you talking about? Like not everyone is as threatened by drag. Like, if you're really threatened by drag, like this guy that did this, he was in the military. He did like 3 or 4 tours. I don't think he's afraid of drag queens. The dude got shot at. Like this, he's like, all right, I've been in war. I can handle being around drag queens, but you're afraid of them. And I do think there is this fragility of, it's masculine fragility. It's this notion of manhood that's so incredibly fragile, that the presence of a man who, for entertainment purposes, dresses like a woman, or maybe if it's someone who's actually trans, who lives as a woman and is a woman, even though born biologically assigned, male identity, it's so threatening. And I think it's that person. It's Tucker Carlson. It's all of these, Charlie Kirk, these guys who were just like, oh my God. I think there's part of him that's like, could I turn off gay?
I mean, like, how, who's written about this or talked about it or even studied it? Like, how far of a leap is it to go from hating yourself because of your questioning your sexuality to targeting people who are making you question that sexuality? It can't be that far.
There's actually a study, and I know some
I have no data, but I will just openly and on the record say, I generally assume that people who are really fired up and angry, much less violent, they're dealing with their own conflict.
Almost always. And there actually is some research on this, which some people have said, oh, it's not a big enough sample, or, methodology is questionable. But I've looked at the methodology. It's not, it's interesting. And I think it's onto something that they actually did a study where they found that men who are the most likely to express homophobic beliefs are actually the ones who get the most turned on by watching gay porn. Right. So what they do in the study is they took men, some of whom identified as gay, some of whom identified as straight, and then the ones that identified as straight were pre-tested for like homophobia and heterosexism and how biased were they. And the ones that weren't very homophobic would watch gay porn and it's like, whatever, doesn't really turn me on, whatever. The ones that were the most homophobic, like, got the most, and they had like sensors on their dicks, basically, is what they did. Like,
really? How do you measure for arousal? Yeah.
They literally had like electric monitors.
Please no, please no, please no, please no, please don't move, please don't move. Ah!
Right. And the ones who had the most change, let's say, in a positive direction, I suppose, were the ones who would express the most homophobic. The gay guys that watched it, I guess they got turned on. But then the straight guys that weren't homophobic were like, whatever. And then
I never told you this. I've told the story a couple times, but I've always told it anonymous. But I want to publicly name him to you. At SiriusXM, I worked with a guy named Andrew Wilkow, who is their right-wing, fiery, really angry, hated gay everything. Internally, he even said things that a guy I think got him in trouble. But I want to put it out there now that it was him. I shared a studio with him. He comes in after me, the right wing host on the conservative channel at Sirius. He would come in after me. Also sharing that studio, the Howard Stern show. They often left a lot of sex toys in there for whatever reason they do. I don't know what they were doing.
Right.
And there was this huge dick, this huge rubber, comically big and floppy dildo.
Yeah.
And so I'm leaving. My show's over. His show's coming in. I don't have a great relationship with him, but I just thought it was funny to pick up a giant dick. And it was a big rubber dick. And I waved it in front of him. And Andrew Wilkow lost his fucking mind. And he was screaming, "Get that away from me." And I was like, "Sir, doth protest." He was so shocked, angry, and terrified that we never stopped joking about it. Because, frankly, those of us that are comfortable with all of it, whatever it is, I don't even give a shit what anybody thinks about me. So I always make jokes about how gay. I just don't care. I don't care. And so if I see a rubber dick, I'm not going to have a riot with it. I'm absolutely going to have fun with that thing. And he lost his mind. And I just wanted to finally name who that was in that story I might have told before. But it's just an example.
Yeah, it's just sort of stunning to me. Guys that are worried about and insecure for whatever reason about their sexuality. Look, we live in a culture that I realize encourages men to think they have to be a certain way, right? And so then if you don't feel that you are that way, you feel inadequate. So that's the culture itself. It's not just the Tucker. It's not like Tucker and this guy you're talking about. And I realize the culture does a number
don't
on us.
Cry.
Right. It does a number on us. And so I have empathy, going back to that piece, I have empathy for guys who fall into that trap that the culture has set for them. Just like I have empathy for, black folks like Kanye who end up doing incredibly anti-black bullshit because the culture has taught them that. But there's a difference between realizing there's a structural cause that we want to attend to, which, by the way, those of us on the left are the ones who want to attend to it and deal with it so it doesn't keep creating that kind of self-hatred. And it's another thing to say that it's okay when the person who's fallen into that rabbit hole just keeps digging, right? Like you fell into the rabbit hole that the culture set, and instead of trying to get out of it, you just keep digging. So that's where you have to take some responsibility. Because, I always joke I had a girlfriend in college who was convinced I was gay because I had books. Like she was convinced because I read books that I must be gay. And she told me that. I thought that was hilarious. It didn't make me but I'm not. It was like, oh, that's funny. And then I met my wife and she thought, well, you must be gay because you have a Bichon Frise, right? So I had a Bichon and she's like, you must be gay. And I'm like, well, I'm not, but that's funny. And because I didn't care, it didn't
exactly. That's funny. I've had the exact same thing. My wife accused me of being gay because I had sex with a ton of men, but
that'll do it. That will do it most of the time.
But that doesn't mean anything, Tim.
Right.
I continue to identify.
I think that there is no question that there is a relationship between that insecurity and you certainly see it at the extremes in the incel community. Both in terms of their misogyny, right, where they're insecure, but also in their really overt homophobia and heterosexism and transphobia. I think that there is a deeply psychological piece to this and a sociological piece to this. And the fact that it's coming up now, the fact that it's happening now when we are ostensibly making progress on LGBTQ stuff in this country and sort of a cultural shift. But what's happening, I think we made some progress and a real cultural shift on the L and the G and maybe the B, though the B oftentimes is sort of ignored and people don't really, think much about it. But the trans piece, I think, has become this lightning rod because we hadn't done enough in that area. And even within the gay and lesbian community, there's a lot of transphobia that trans folk will talk about, and a lot of gay and lesbian folk will talk about that there's transphobia within the community that they're still struggling with. So there's a lot of work that has to be done here. And those of us who claim to be allies, straight and cisgender allies to LGBTQ folk, have got to do more than simply watch certain television shows or, I went to my friend's, same-sex marriage and ordered gifts off the registry. Isn't that cool? Great. But I'm telling you, if the Proud Boys are showing up in your town to disrupt a drag show, maybe it's a drag story time for kids, maybe it's a drag brunch that isn't even for kids, and they're showing up to it, you have to go to, because those things are getting canceled. Yeah. And terrorized, and they're canceling them rather than doing them, while we sit around and go, wow, when is the next season of RuPaul starting? Like there are queens in your town that are just trying to make a living and entertain and have a good time. And are you going to defend them, or are you just going to turn on the TV,
Really well said. Let's get to the final thing I wanted to talk with you about, although I could talk with you for 18 hours, which is last night's runoff election. And Karen Madison, longtime listener, sent in a text thread with a whole bunch of listeners I love. She sent me a link to this Twitter thread of yours that starts with, tired of folks treating Herschel Walker and Kanye West like sad tragedies rather than grown-ass men who happen to be assholes. This infantilizing, it's CTE, it's mental illness, is a form of white supremacy which denies these black men agency. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, like today in the Washington Post, there was a piece, and that was the title. And I realize authors don't always get to pick their titles, and probably didn't hear it, but the title was something like The Tragedy of Herschel Walker. Like, don't give me I didn't even read the piece, and the piece might be great, but I don't like the framing. When you say it's a tragedy, or you talk about, Kanye West's mental illness, I get it. He's a hot mess. Herschel Walker's a hot mess. Does he have CTE? I don't know. Is Kanye bipolar? Well, we know he is, but he won't take his meds because Jews made the pills or whatever, So, I mean, whatever, great. Sorry for trying
He's
to
missing
help
out on those amazing Jew pills that really equalize your mood.
It's the Jew pills, whatever. Yeah, great. But the thing that's nuts about this is we can do two things at once, right? Or we ought to be able to, which is one, and this is crazy to have to tell conservatives this.
Right.
Because conservatives are the one that are like, personal responsibility. Stop making excuses for your bullshit. Own your stuff. Take personal responsibility for your mess. But here it's like, he can't. Okay, so he can't string a sentence together. But he got hit a lot on the football field. Yeah, but you want to make him a senator. So no. And at some point you have to say, listen, if you're holding guns to women's heads, threatening to kill them, you're abandoning your children one after the other, or you're, in the case of Kanye West, like saying that you like Hitler and Jews need to forgive Hitler, though we don't know for what, because the Holocaust was fake anyway. So whatever.
Oh, that's a good point. Never even heard anybody make that point. What are we forgiving him for if he didn't do anything wrong? Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, he said he didn't do anything wrong, but forgive him anyway. But there comes a point where you got to own your shit, even as we say, look, you know what? We need a way better mental health care system in this country. No shit. You know who wants to do that? Those of us on the left. We're the ones who would like universal health care, including mental and emotional health care. And it's those of you on the right that are saying, well, if you can pay for it. Well, Kanye can pay for it. He still won't pay for it. So at what point does he have to own that? Got enough money to get all the mental health help that he wants.
It's hard to feel bad for someone not having access to resources when they are a multimillionaire or billionaire. It's hard to feel bad.
And Herschel Walker's got money too. They both could get help for whatever their situations are, and God bless them if they do. But the idea that we therefore infantilize them and act like they can't be held accountable for their stuff. No, that's absolute nonsense. There comes a point where we can do both things. We can say there's a social cause of their bullshit. There's a social cause for all of our bullshit, usually. But when we go down that rabbit hole, if we keep digging, it becomes our problem that we have to address. It's like when I go to therapy, I can sit there and say, okay, wow, now I know why I'm so fucked up. Like I know where the damage comes from, but I don't get to just sit back and go, well, I don't have to fix it because it's not my problem. It's not my mess. I didn't create the problem. No, but I'm in the problem. So I got to take some ownership of it. And it drives me nuts when we don't do that. Or even worse, as I say on that thread, when someone like Van Jones comes along and says, to Jewish folks the other night in some big event that he was speaking at, United Jewish Federation or something, I don't know what it was, makes the comment like apologizes on behalf of black people to Jews for Kanye.
Not great.
Like, but that's not what we like. First of all, nobody deputized Van Jones to apologize for black people. I'm fairly confident they didn't take a vote in Black America and like, that's the guy. We'll just let him apologize. Secondly, Kanye West didn't become a billionaire because black folks bought all his records. Like, white folks are about 80% of all music purchases, including hip hop music purchases. So Kanye's rich, not just because of black people. And he didn't learn to praise Hitler in the black church. Miss Donda, his mama, didn't teach him to praise Hitler. Right. So where did he get that nonsense? Black people don't have to apologize for Kanye West. Right. Maybe number one, Kanye West needs to apologize for Kanye West. And then more broadly, we as a society need to apologize, or not apologize, but deal with the way that Kanye West was taught anti-blackness, the way that he's been taught Christian nationalism, the way that he's been taught the misogyny that he apparently has been practicing for a long time. And for Herschel Walker, same thing. Where did Herschel Walker get the idea that it was okay to threaten to kill women? I don't know, probably a culture that's always apparently thought that violence against women was
all
acceptable.
of this analysis is personified when many people have made these remarks, but just him sitting between Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz. Like, that's where he learned it. You tweeted, blame rests with the society that teaches these lessons about how to treat women, view black people, Jews, etc., and those who then apply those lessons in destructive ways, despite most of their own community having resisted those lessons for centuries. As an act of resistance, Ye and Walker didn't turn out the way they did because they listened too much to black people. Exactly the opposite.
It wasn't black folks didn't, and so I'm trying to say it's both and. Like, they have agency. They are acting on the basis of the bullshit they were taught. They got to own that. And then we, as a broader society, in order to prevent others like them, have to take responsibility for the nonsense that we drill into the skulls of people. Because as I've long said, you cannot, white supremacy cannot, and misogyny and all these other systems of oppression, they can't survive only because the minds of the dominant group gets colonized. You have to also colonize the minds of some in the marginalized group. That's how those systems stay in place. It's always been how they stay in place. There've always been the attempt to get just enough women to go along with misogyny, just enough black and brown folks to go along with white supremacy, just enough working class people to go along with the class system, and so it's not about letting them off the hook. It's not about saying they don't have agency. It's about saying we got to deal with the systemic piece that teaches the nonsense. But once you've learned the nonsense and everybody else in your community or the vast majority are like, that's nonsense. And you're like, no, I think it's very logical. Well, then you got to own that. Right. You got to own that.
Yeah. What do you say to those? And Raphael Warnock actually addressed this pretty eloquently last night in his acceptance speech. What do you say to those who say, listen, you're talking about all these new laws that created suppression of the vote, of the black vote, and yet your Democratic candidate nominee still won. So why are you complaining about voter suppression when your guy won? He addressed that. What do you say?
Well, I didn't see what he said, but here's the point.
He was like, we won in spite of it.
Right. The fact that I'm able to clear the hurdle, doesn't mean that the hurdle should be there. Look, I've used this analogy before when we talk about white supremacy in general. Madam C.J. Walker became a millionaire in like 1911. First woman ever to be a millionaire. Well, I think maybe the first black person ever to be a millionaire by making, cosmetics that white cosmetic companies didn't feel the need to make for black people because who cared about that market, right? So that's what she does. She starts making these beauty products. She becomes a millionaire. You can't sit there and go, well, Madam C.J. Walker became a millionaire. What's the rest of y'all's excuse? No, like the obstacle should never have been there. The fact that some people can overcome an obstacle, the fact that a whole community can decide to go show you that they're going to turn out no matter what you throw at them doesn't mean it's okay to throw that at them unless you actually can demonstrate fraud. And they can't. Every single time you hear a story about voter fraud in this country in the last 2 years, with almost no exceptions, it's somebody voting for Trump 3 times on behalf of their dead wife. Oh, my wife died, but I know she wanted to vote for Trump. Or it's these old white people in the villages down in Florida that, like, you know, took their golf cart to the polls, then went home, put on a mustache, whatever the hell they did, changed clothes, voted 3 times, you know, like it's always those people. They're a projection cult. Everything they accuse other people of doing, they're the ones doing it. Black folks are just trying to vote once. That's all. They're not trying to go 3 times. They're just trying to go once without having to deal with bullshit. And the fact that he
go ahead. Fact that you
the fact that he won, the fact he did win, but that doesn't mean that it was okay to put the obstacles in the way or try to purge people from the rolls unnecessarily, which they've been trying to do for years in Georgia. But in addition to that, it shouldn't have been close. This is what Raphael Warnock's not going to say because he's trying to be diplomatic, but I will say it. How is it 2 percentage points? How is it that close with one of the least qualified candidates for public office at a national level in the history of the United States Senate? This is someone who was singularly unqualified, and the vast majority of Republicans knew it, but they still were like, but I got to go vote for him because we're going to have a black guy. We want that black guy. We don't want the one that, you know, is the emeritus pastor at King's Church. We don't like that kind of Christian. We like the one that's talking about being a vampire, that's talking about, you know, that threatened to kill his wife, that actually is a walking example of every stereotype about black men that we have. Like that's what's crazy about this. The stereotypes that right-wing white people have been weaving about black men, violent and crappy fathers that walk away from their children. Like he is actually like he's the one that actually fits. Like that's not an accurate description of black men generally. It's an accurate description of that dude. And you were willing to vote for him. So what does that tell us? Like it shouldn't have been close. But the reason it was close is a combination of white folks being so tribal on behalf of these conservative notions and reactionary notions that they'll vote for anyone that upholds traditional hierarchy, again, going back to that notion. And then secondly, the fact that voter suppression over the last several years in Georgia and removing people from the rolls who shouldn't have been removed, no doubt suppressed some of the vote. It wouldn't have been as close if that hadn't happened.
Yeah, Sherilyn Eiffel tweeted, the closeness of this race is among the most depressing and ominous things I've seen in American politics in my lifetime. For her to say that, you know, I don't think that's
right. I mean, look, let's be real clear. If David Duke, if that election in 1990 for the U.S. Senate were happening today, and Duke was the age now that he was then, I mean, he's older now, and there's been other stuff that's happened that sort of made him maybe unelectable. But if you were to transplant those conditions or those individuals at that age and put them in this era under these conditions, absolutely David Duke wins. Because those folks in Louisiana, look, he got 60% of the white vote anyway in 1990, right?
And that was it for U.S. Senate in Louisiana?
That was the Senate race. He got 6 out of 10. In the governor's race, he got 55 out of 100, so not quite as good, but still the majority. That was in 1990. Keep in mind, that was at a time when you still had to wink and nod about being a Nazi. You couldn't just slick about it, and you had to sort of hide it, right? Now, if he were running and doing the same thing and still playing the game and not, you know, maybe acting like he wasn't really a Nazi, I have no doubt that in 2022 or 2024 or 2020, he would have or would win that election. He would have gotten enough votes.
I'm not familiar with this David Duke, or who is this Nick Fuentes? What is your
who is that? Or Nick Fuentes?
I'll let you go, but is there anything worth saying about Nick Fuentes? He's clearly mixed up about his sexual orientation. That's
I don't know if he's mixed up about his sexuality, but Senor Fuentes is not Blanco. I think we can say that. Like how is this guy like? Senor Fuentes, I think we should refer to him as Senor Fuentes everywhere we go.
I never even picked up on that. Yeah, it's like a Latino last name, right?
He admits that one of his parents is Mexican.
Oh, no way.
This. Yeah, one of his parents is Mexican. And he said that on one of his own live streams. First of all, there's that. There's also the fact that he does like better jazz hands than Bob Fosse.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
During his live stream.
Yep.
Like he just is, he's doing this, it's sort of, so you do wonder about him in certain ways. Not to say that, guys that do jazz hands are, gay. It's just that in his case, I think we should probably start that rumor just because he deserves that. But I mean, he's not, I don't think he's white. And I think we should start a campaign to out him as the non-white person. Because, that's what really often brings down these Nazis. When we find out they have people of color, especially when you find if it's a Jewish Mexican, that would be best. If we can find a Mexican Jew.
Someone needs to step up. Someone in his lineage needs to step up.
We need, what's her name? Is it Jennifer Mendelsohn that does the political genealogy work? I think that's her name over on Twitter. She's really good. She calls it resistance genealogy. She's the one that dug up the stuff on Stephen Miller, about his family coming to America when he was doing all the anti-immigrant stuff.
Oh, I'm not even familiar with her. I'm looking her up now.
She's really, I think it's Jennifer Mendelsohn is the name. I think
that's right. Jennifer at Clever Title TK.
Yeah. Is that it?
Yep,
is that the one that says, yeah.
Yep.
She does this amazing, we need to get her on it because she could probably figure out what his ancestry is. And there's got to be at least a couple of us Jews in there. There's got to be a few of us. I feel confident that there's somebody that
he'll find a way, though, to, I mean, it's not, and you write about this, it's not like Jewish people can't hate Jewish people, can't be Nazis. I mean, like,
one of the guys that was arrested in was it Grand Central or Penn Station, right? They in New York, they busted a couple of guys that were supposedly going to go shoot up a synagogue. I think the FBI was on to them or whatever, and they arrested them a couple of weeks ago. One of them is Jewish. Actually was raised Jewish or has a Jewish parent or whatever. And so, yeah, look, there's obviously, I'm joking about Nick Fuentes having Jewish ancestry or whatever. I'm joking about him having Mexican ancestry just because I think he deserves to be humiliated and made fun of because he's a Nazi. And I generally, don't really care much about how Nazis feel. But having said that, I do, again, the larger point that we've been making this whole time, whether it's about Kanye, whether it's about the guy that shot up Club Q. There are people who have mixed ancestry racially, ethnically, culturally, religiously, who come to hate part of who they are. And it's a terrible thing. As far as Nick Fuentes is concerned, honestly, fuck him. I don't care. But I think it's really important, if that's part of his background, that we think about what are the messages that are being sent, even to the targets of injustice. What are the messages that we send to young kids of color, to young mixed race kids, to multiracial kids, multi-ethnic kids, people from interreligious, interfaith families? What are the messages that we send about othering people? Because when we send messages about othering, the thing is, every single one of us, not every single one, but most of us have got some identity as part of who we are, where we're the other. Like, very few people, right, are just the dominant group. There are some who have all the dominant identities, and they're very fortunate, I suppose, in terms of privilege, right? But you're maybe the only one. But like, most of us have got at least one, right? So yeah, you might be straight, you might be male, you might be white, you might be upper middle class or affluent, but you're Jewish, or you've got a disability of some sort, or whatever. You're like me, 5'8" in a tall man's world, which I've learned to deal with. But it's just one of those things. So we've all got an area where we're the other, and the problem is we live in a culture that says if you're the other, there's something wrong with you. Right? We live in a society, and maybe it's not just us. I'm sure it's a global phenomenon to some extent too. But we're too quick to not only identify ourselves. I mean, identity's great. Like, we got all these different identities. The problem is not noticing it. The problem is not labeling it. The problem is, what do I do with the label? And at some point, if I'm the other and you're telling me in a million different ways that there's something wrong with you because you're gay, or you're bi, or you're insecure about your masculinity, or you're just tiny and not big muscular guy, or you're a person of color, or you're working class, or you've got a speech impediment, or you're deaf, or you've got something, that makes you different. And in whatever way it is, if the society's telling you there's something broken and wrong about you, we can't be surprised when some of the people that get that message
do two things. Number one, they come to believe some of the negativity about themselves. And then what they end up doing in order to feel better, they cling to the upside part of themselves, right? So in other words, I've got this thing that makes me the other, and that thing makes me feel shitty. That thing gets my ass kicked. Let me identify with this other thing that makes me feel powerful, right? So, okay, I've got a disability, but, or yeah, I'm poor, but, that's what the whole thing about whiteness is. Like poor white people being like, yeah, I don't have anything, but at least I'm not black, right? Or at least I'm not whatever. And so it's all part of the same, the other hate and the self-hate all comes from this societal push to tell us that some are better than others. And so, you are going to have people who are going to internalize that message, and they're going to do one of two things. They're going to take that out on the other, or they're going to take it out on themselves, or both. And they're going to be highly destructive of self and other. And so, so as much as I couldn't care less about Nick Fuentes, and I hope his life is sort of miserable, to be honest, until he gets, unless he wants to make some, amends for all the evil that he's put out in the world in his 5 years of adulthood.
I predict he will. He's so young and dumb, and he's had so much success. I predict he's gonna. I have to.
He might. He is young, and he's been at this since he was 16 or 17. I hope so. Look, I've got friends who have come out of this world, but until they do, and until they show a willingness to do so, I can't mess with them, and I can't really have a whole lot. I mean, I empathize to the extent that I empathize with any human being who I see who's acting a fool. But at the same time, like, I got to protect myself from people like Nick Fuentes, and I got to protect other people from folks like Nick Fuentes. And if he wants to get his shit together and then make amends, it's not enough to come out and say, oh my God, I had an epiphany, I feel so bad. Like, he's going to have a lot of work to do. If he has his come to Jesus moment, he's going to have a lot of work to do. And some of these guys that come out of the movement do the work, and some of them don't. Some of them want cheap grace, and there can't be any cheap grace for someone like Nick Fuentes at this point, no matter how young and stupid he is. Because I got two kids that are just a little bit younger than him, and they got the same brain development, same thing, and they didn't turn out like this, and neither did their friends. So there's no inevitability. You can't use age as an excuse, but hopefully as he gets older, he'll either be snapped out of it by somebody else, or he'll snap out of it himself. But until then, we just got to keep it moving, and we have to protect ourselves from him and his crew.
Tim Wise, everybody. Can't thank you enough, man. I really love when we talk, and I really appreciate you letting me record them.
Oh, absolutely, man. Thank you.
All right, bud. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Be good.
And there he goes, Tim Wise. We had to switch over to the phone. Something happened, but that last 5 minutes, if you noticed the difference there in the sound quality, I had to switch over to the phone, but I think all of the points came across crystal clear as always. Tim is just the best. Go read him at Medium. Go follow him on Twitter as well as other social media platforms. Get all of his books. Thank him for joining me, and I hope to see you tonight at our hangout. How about it? Mara Quint will be there. I hope you'll be there. If you're not a subscriber, sign up now. It's ad-free these days. I can't do the show without your subscription, so please go to standupwithpete.com right now and sign up for as little as $5 a month. It would be a great Christmas present to you. Get a gift subscription for somebody else, and that's all I've got for you. Be the change you want to see in the world, and I will talk to you right here tomorrow.
Knees, you gotta stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up, that's right. You got to rise up, you got to stand up. Stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. walk round and then stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Oh, got to stand